So let's jump in and start setting up the file. So you can see my background layer here. I'm going to double click on that. Just name that OG. So I always have my original. If you Command J, you can duplicate the layer, and I like to name it base. This is my base layer. It's the first layer that I'm going to make adjustments to. So what do we got here? I'm not thrilled with this color cast. So I'm going to bring up a curves adjustment layer and see if I can just minimize it, bring this back into reality. I clicked the black point sampler. So I'm just going to click somewhere in the sky there because I know I want that to be among the darkest areas in the image. And that did a pretty good job of setting the tonal range. I'm going to click on this neutral sampler, the gray point, and click on something that I think in the scene would probably be neutral. Anywhere on this rim is probably safe. So that gave me a good correction to the color cast and the compressed tonal range that we had. Now, some of the challenges with this image is that the perspective is kind of different. It's a little too cramped. The camera's really low, really close to the ground. It all kind of gives a sense that this is a pretty static shot. And we're trying to change it into something that looks like there's a lot of movement and action. So I'm going to start by adjusting some of the geometry in the image. I'm going to convert my base layer to Smart Object before I do this, and you'll see why. I'm going to go into my filter, Camera Raw Filter. I'm going to apply it to this Smart Object. And I want to go up here and click on Geometry because I want to improve some of these lines and make it not so warped. I'm just going to start by clicking Auto. And that did a pretty good job right there. So I'm pretty happy with that as a start. I think vertically, I'm going to bring it down just a bit to straighten up some of those lines. Horizontally, yeah, it kind of brings the back of the car forward. Yeah, maybe just a little rotation, but I'm going to bring the scale down quite a bit because I want some more real estate to be able to work in. So that feels about right. I'm going to use the generative expand feature to fill in all that space. This is really handy now that we can do this right inside ACR. So yeah, not great, but I mean, it filled it with something. So that's all I really care about right now, because I'm going to go back in and fix this stuff. So let's keep this one. I like this one the best, and I'm going to click OK. So let's crop this down to a more cinematic aspect ratio. Let's go 16:9. And I don't need that much street in between the car and me, so I'm going to just crop this to the top. Make sure you have snap turned on when you're doing that to the document bounds, because if not, you might fudge that placement and you get a little transparent pixel edge up there. So cropping that down, that looks better. I'm going to get started on cleaning up some of this garbage that was left over from generative expand. I'm just going to grab my lasso tool and make a selection around this area of stuff that I'm not digging. And I'm going to hit some generative fill on that. I'm going to use Firefly Image Edit for these. It seems to get the best results with architecture. I'm going to type a city at night in the distance, a sidewalk and concrete rail in the foreground. Well, let's see how that does. It's not great, but I mean, it's pretty okay, I would say. Let's see if we can get a little bit better. A couple more options. Well, the railing's definitely better in that one. I like these buildings. That's cool. I'd say this is the best of both worlds because I can sort of hide that or fix it later if I need to. Some weird stuff going on in the sky, but I'm not going to worry about that just yet. I'm going to rasterize this layer just for the sake of housekeeping. I'm going to copy that prompt right there because I want to use the same prompt for this part of the image. Let's see. I like making kind of more bespoke selections. I feel like it lets the model know a little bit more that it should be really focusing on a given area. I don't know, it might just be superstition, but let's see. Oh, that was pretty nice. I think I like that. I mean, I can even do with those trees over there. Okay, I'm gonna stick with this. Rasterize it. I'm gonna see if I can get some more buildings in behind the tree. See how it takes that.
Crystal Thunder almost failed to to it. Right now, he give you one right bracelet. So Bolson record. He gets sick.
That's kind of cool. Okay, I'm going with that. Let's see what else I can take care of here. Yeah, this came out a little funky. I'm just gonna see if I can just get it to fix that. Cool, I'll go with that. This got tall and weird. I do not want that. We're just gonna see if I can remove that. Let's see how it does. Oh yeah, that's great. Okay, so we're pretty well cleaned up. These lights I know are gonna be a problem because they're interacting with the car. I want to get them out of here. So let's see if we can remove these. Yeah, that looks great. And I'll give this one a go. It looks nice too. Good work, remove tool. The next step I want to do is to get the car out of the scene because I want them to be separate. So let's see if we can select subject. And I'm going to expand that selection by, 20 pixels. That's fine. Maybe I'll get the rest of the shadow here so it maybe gets less confused. I noticed that's the thing. And I'm going to do another remove. Let's see how it does. Boom. Not bad. That's a pretty nice result. I'll take it. I think this whole street is a little dark for my liking, and I'm going to see if I can get it to give me a better street. I'm going to try nano for this one. I kind of like that. I'm going to see maybe if it could just give me one more. Interesting. think I'm going to keep both of these. So I'm going to rasterize that. Rasterize that. I'm going to group that and call it street. So one thing I need to do now is step back and get the car out of there. I'm going to select all the way down to the base because I did some edits to the lights in there. I want those included in the car, and I'm going to hold down Command-Shift-Option and merge layers. That pops it up to a new layer. I'm going to select subject here, and I'm going to Command-J pop that to a new layer. Okay, so I'm going to do a little cleanup here. I think I want that shadow back because it was really helping to ground the car. So I'm just going to switch to a brush and brush that back in by brushing it out on the mask. Let's see if there's anything. There's a little bit more detail around the tires. Cool, that works. Okay, I'm just going to do a little brushing back that street. Just going to blend that back in a little bit. I just want this to be good enough right here because I'm going to use some grain tricks and clean that up a little more. Okay, I'm just going to drop the car in here into its own layer group. And now we can start getting into the fun stuff. I'm going to stamp up in that same method I use, Control, Command, Shift, click, merge layers, and pops everything up to the top. So this is the base layer that I'm going to use to start making all of the blur effects to the background. So I'm going to convert it to a smart object, and then I'm going to simply just duplicate that smart object up with Command J. And I want to start adding some blurs. So I'm going to think about the different planes in the image. Overall, I'm going to set a blur on the background for the distance buildings. And for that, I'm going to use the blur gallery. So I'm going to filter blur gallery, and I'm going to use path blur. So I really like path blur as opposed to motion blur because it is a motion blur, but you have some additional stuff you can adjust, and you'll see how it works. So set the speed down to something like 10. The other settings you can keep as they are. One of the effects that I like though is this motion effect, this strobe stuff. And so if you look at it, how it will shift and create little strobe effects that are just kind of a nice little detail. I'm going to reduce it. So if you watch some of the lights in the buildings here, as I reduce it down, you'll be able to see them come in. Just little strobe jitters on these lights. I think it has a really cool effect. And I'm going to go ahead and enter, click OK. Cool. That's a neat little centered motion blur effect. Now I want to do something more dramatic for the foreground though. So I'm just going to duplicate that same smart object, and I'm going to go back into the blur gallery. So this one, I'm going to take the arrow and I'm going to stretch it out through the whole scene. And I'm going to increase the speed quite a bit. And I don't want this to be a centered blur because right now everything is blurring in both directions. I want it to blur in the direction of the way the arrow is pointing. So I'm going to drop the strobe strength down just a little bit. And I'm going to up the strobe count to, like 6 or 7. So this totally doesn't work for the buildings in the background, but up here in front, it looks really intense, and that's what I'm looking for. So I'm going to click OK. Great, so we got that, and I don't want that to be on the buildings in the background. So I'm going to fill that mask with black, and I'm just going to brush this into all the foreground. I want to make sure my opacity is up at 100 because I want to be able to see it coming in. And I think with a blurry image like this, you can really get away with a lot of quick masking. And I really like quick masking. I don't like spending a lot of time on masking if I don't have to. Yeah, so this is looking pretty crazy. And another little trick to the brush, if you click once and hold down Shift and click again, it draws a line for you. So let's try that all the way down here. And so I've got that line, extend that out, and grab my marquee. I just fill that. I'm going to be putting lighting effects back here too, so I'm not super precious about how perfect these masks are. I'm just going to do a little light touch on that tree because I think it's maybe kind of closer to us. But cool, that's awesome. That's giving a total difference between the foreground and the background, and that's exactly what I want to see. I feel like the car is falling into the background a little too much. I'm just going to do a little touch of color grading and see if I can get it to come forward a little bit more. I'm bringing up a curve, and I just want to darken the background a bit. This is mostly for the top area, I think. I was okay with the street, but I'm going to just brush in some of that darkness back there. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. And then in the car group, I'm going to set the layer group to normal. I like that because then I can just use adjustment layers without clipping them to anything or doing careful masking on them, because if this is set to normal and not pass through, it sort of acts like an auto mask. So only the pixel layers will show through this layer group, and the adjustment layers will only apply to the pixel layers that are in this group. So it's kind of like having auto masking. So I'm going to just open up the car a bit, give it a little bit more contrast. Yeah, that pops that out. That looks good. Okay, I want to start seeing if I can get some of those light streaks back in here. They're just a really cool graphic element. And I don't want to go digging through stock art for this stuff. So think what I'm going to do is just see if I can generate some light streaks. Let's give it a go. So I'm going to try Firefly Image Edit, bright, horizontal, light streaks. Ooh, those are pretty sick. Don't want them to be quite that bright. I like something like this. Yeah, that works a lot better than any of the others. So I'm going to try that one more time. I'm going to leave out bright because I think that might be causing some issues. And let's see, I'm going to transform that. I want that not to be quite so high up there. And I'm going to use the same model, horizontal, light streaks. Let's go. Oh, that's pretty cool. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Oh, those two are really kind of cool. I might combine those two. Third one's a little weak. I'm gonna see if I can get some more options. Oh, that's cool. I mean, I can use parts of all these. So I'm just gonna Command J each one of these that I like. I actually like that too. So let's rasterize all these layers. I guess this one. All right, so I'm going to see about blending these in. I'm going to set this to screen. It's too bright. I'm going to bring up a curve and just clip it to that. Bring down the black point. See how that starts to like break it up a little bit? That's kind of what I'm looking for. Do the same thing. I just duplicated that same layer. This one might need like a lower opacity. I'd like it to be like pretty nice and textured. Yeah, just duplicating up that same curve. Maybe I can move this up a bit. See, it gets some of the background in there. Yeah, see, that back layer might be just too strong for everything. And I think I'm just going to see if I can move it down and reduce the opacity even more to like 40 or 50, something like that. I turn this last one on. Yeah, that one's pretty cool too. Yeah, it's looking pretty awesome. And the nice thing too is like kind of obstructed this sidewalk, so it's not so prominent. And I think it makes the car look like it could be more in a street and not parked next to a sidewalk. So that's a good result. So I'm going to throw a motion blur on these just to smooth them out. Something like that. Now I want to put it on each one so you can just go up here to filter motion blur. It'll just run the same settings.
Patrol must for the 2-year period. Plus, ask how to get a $500 A-grade farm on online dig package.
So let me see if I like that better. I think I do. So I'm going to bring up my history and yeah, I like that a lot better. It gets rid of a lot of the detail on there that's distracting. Cool. So we've got a really fast background, but now we need a fast car. So let's get to work. I'm going to convert this to a smart object. I'm zoom in here to the car. I'm going to duplicate this layer up a couple times because I'm going to be doing a bunch of blurs in different stages. So the first one that I want to do is just a motion blur. And I'm going to bring that up to like 25, 26. So this is really just for the edges. And so you can see here, they kind of extend past. I'll turn it on and off. It just gives you like an outside soft edge. And the next one I'm going to do is a path blur and blur gallery. So what I'm going to do is drag the arrow out because I don't want this to be a centered blur. I'm going to set it to rear sync flash. It's got a different quality to it. I can't exactly describe what it is, but it's cool. But it's quite strong, so I want to bring it all the way down and then just using my arrow key, just bring it up. See, what I'm trying to do with this blur layer is just give a very basic blur to the whole car. But this is nicer than motion blur because even though it's blurring, you can still really see the edge detail. And that's really why I like it, is it gives it just a touch, but we're still product accurate. We can recognize everything on the product. So that's where I start. So I'm going to duplicate a couple more of these because I know I'm going to need about 3 or 4 more blur levels. So the next one that I want to do, I've got this base blur, I've got my edge blurs. There's actually a nice little detail coming off the tire too, which I like. The next one, I want to add a more extreme blur, but selectively brush it into parts of the car so that I don't obscure the entire car. So let's bring up that layer visibility, and I'm going to add another path blur. And I'm going to move it more to the back of the vehicle. Now I don't want that to be a centered blur. Yeah, I want it all to be moving that direction. See, the centered blur does it evenly, but if I turn that off, it's really a directional blur. Oh, you know what? Here, I'm going to try a rear sync flash because I really like the looks of this. It's less, I guess, disruptive. I'll bring it down a bit. Okay, so that's nice. I'm getting some good details in here, getting some good streaks. That's really what I'm looking for. I'm going to back the taper off just a bit too. Let's click OK. Now you see here, I don't want this over the entire car because it's too disruptive. So what I'm going to do is add a mask, fill that with black, and I'm going to get my brush with just like an opacity of 40. And this is really what I call plus zoning. It's like, where can you get pluses in the image? Selectively looking for areas where it works nicely. For instance, I kind of like that coming off the rim there. I like this and that kind of haze coming off the front. I like some of these streaks coming off the light, a little of that streak coming off the mirror there. And the things that I don't like are like where that goes too dark right there. Some of those dark areas aren't really doing it for me. So I'm not going to use those, but just brushing them in is going to give you control over what you want to keep and what you don't. I like a low opacity so I can, kind of massage these in there. And what I'll do is turn on and off. I'll be looking at an area and go, well, is there something cool happening here? Yeah, there kind of is. So I'm just going back and forth between turning mask on and off. Now that's done with the holding shift down. And I like what's coming out there. So this is just adding some feelings of speed and movement. I like what's coming off those reflections right there. It was so I'd really like to obscure what's kind of inside the car because there's not a driver in this shot, but I think it's dark enough that I can actually just get away with that. But if we needed to, we could probably add a driver silhouette with some gin fill. Yeah, see, I like those effects coming off the lower rail there. Remember, I like this over here. We're going to do a separate treatment to the wheels, so I don't have to be super careful about that right now. And I want a lot of this movement coming off the back. I kind of like where that obscures the line there. Actually, that coming off the handle looks kind of cool. So where else is working? I'd say some of this off the front rim. And when are you done? Good question. That really just happens when you don't have anything else that you're seeing that's going to improve things substantially. When you start running out of large percentage increases, I would say, that's when you know you're done with that step there. I don't like those dark things that are happening. No, too dark. So let's turn this on and off. I mean, we've just increased the feeling of movement pretty substantially with just that additional layer. Now, the next couple of blurs we're going to do are really, really cool. And they're going to add a huge sense of movement because the one thing in this image that's really standing still to me right now are the wheels. So let's make those look like they're moving really fast. We're going to go right back up to Blur Gallery and we're going to use Spin Blur. It's so cool. It's so much better than our legacy radial blur. But I mean, check that out. Pretty cool. I don't even really need to mess with these settings because I think that's doing a good job, but you can see you could crank it way up. But I want to see some of the detail of that rim. So let's okay that. And I'm going to put a mask on this because I don't want to see, the rest of the car. I just want to see the wheel. Brush set to 100. Easy peasy. Now we have a fast looking wheel. Now I lost some of the stuff that I liked from the other blurs I was bringing in. So I'm going to back that off. Be a little bit more careful. There's a little softening happening. Now we need to do the back wheel. Same thing. Spin blur. Bring it down. Fit it to the tire. And I think I had the last one at like 20. Looks good to me. Mask that. That does a lot to increase that feeling of speed and movement. And the final blur that I want to do is a big one. I want to add it to some very specific areas of the car, but I want it to be really strong. So I'm not going to use that sync flash. I'm just going to use the regular path blur. It's not centered, remember. This one I'm really going to paint in lower on the car. Reduce that endpoint speed just a little bit and click OK. I'll take that. So that's really extreme, but it's going to be really handy in just a couple places to give it a few more percentage points of plus. So I'm going to keep it low there. I put this back down to 40 opacity so I can kind of massage that in a little bit. Kind of just amp stuff up. Just a little bit more. And so holding down shift, I'm going to go back and forth and do a similar thing here. So the cool thing about this system is if you want to add back into a previous blur layer, you can just go back to that because this edge here is a little too sharp for my taste. All right, so that just adds a little bit more movement. Zoom out a little bit. So that is a pretty incredible image I've got now. I think the only thing left is really just a little bit of housekeeping. I love going back and forth from where I started and where I ended up. Pretty cool. So I do want to see if I can get a little bit more brightness on the street. See if it'll cooperate. Yeah, I think that's better. Use a big brush there and I like how that opens that up a little bit more. Kind of brings us into the action. I think you can probably crank up the car a little bit more too. Let's see, I'm going to bring up another curve. And start to lose a little bit of detail in there, but yeah, that's cool. That adds a bunch of contrast. That's nice. I'm going to paint it back off the sides just a bit. Nice. The car pops now. So what I want to do next are some unifying moves to kind of tie the room together. What I want to do is use this really simple tool called photo filter. And what it does is it just puts a cast over everything. Let's see if we want it above the car or not. So before, after, before, after. I kind of like it above the car. I also want to warm up the foreground a little bit more. That's a really good trick to remember, that warm advances and cool recedes. So what does that mean? It means that the stuff you want to make appear closer to you or closer to the viewer, an easy trick is to make it warmer. That'll create more space. I'm going to back that off just a little bit. Put that below the car because I don't want to warm it up anymore. You know, I'm kind of second guessing putting this over the car. I think it makes it look too orange, maybe. Yeah, kind of like this. And the final ingredient to tie every composition together is adding some film grain. Now, you might be used to carrying around film grain files with you, but I like using this really cool trick with the camera raw filter to make my grain. What I'm going to do is bring up a new layer on top. I'm going to fill that with 50% gray. Boom. I'm going to convert that to a smart object, and I'm going to set that blending mode to, since I want a strong grain, I'm just going to put it on linear light. So yeah, nothing happens yet because that's 50% gray. And in these blending modes, 50% gray does nothing to your image until I put a filter on it, which I'm going to use the camera raw filter. And I'm going to go down here to effects. And I'm going to bring up some grain, put it like 18. Seems to be a sweet spot. You can't really see much when you're zoomed out. It's a little tricky to eyeball it. Sometimes you'll go back and forth between being in the filter and on your canvas, but you can see how this grain gets created here. And once I click OK, got a really strong, heavy grain on the image. It's pretty sharp. So what I'm going to do is add one more filter on top, just a touch more softness to it with Gaussian blur. And that can come all the way down to like 0.2, 0.3. And it just softens it up a bit. And I'm not loving how it's affecting the darker areas of the image. I think it looks good here. We just need to lighten it up a bit. I'm going to bring the opacity of this layer down to 80. And then I'm going to double click on it to bring up layer styles. And I'm going to blend if to basically take it out of the shadows just a little bit. You hold down Command, you can split the arrows like this. And it's just right there on the edge. And just that little bit brings it out of the shadows. So there you have it. This is a complete image, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out. It's so cool. And just to know that we can start with something as boring as this and create this is pretty incredible. And you saw how quickly it can come together, especially with all these new generative tools we have. Just the possibilities are really endless if you think about your images in this way. I mean, we built up the entire scene with adding buildings, trees. We got our light streaks in there to generate out of nothing, thin air. And you saw the way that I layered them up and used stuff I liked and got rid of stuff that I didn't. I love these blur effects on the background. Those look so cool. And you see how just a few final touches can really just tie the scene together and give it a feeling of coherence.